We have had a partnership with the world's oceans since the first humans walked the earth. We rely on the ocean for food, transportation, fuel, medicine, and even for decoration. This partnership has been mostly one-sided. We took from the ocean without much thought of giving back or understanding the consequences. For generations, it was thought the resources of the ocean were endless. In the last few decades, we have finally come to realize the bounties of the ocean can be depleted. It has also become apparent that there is much about the ocean we have yet to learn. Scientists and those who make a living from the sea are trying to play catch-up to understand the diversity of life in the world's oceans. This quest for understanding is particularly pressing in Canada. With the collapse of the cod stocks in the North Atlantic, variability in salmon stocks in the Pacific Ocean off British Columbia, and the heightened interest in the resources of the Arctic Ocean, many Canadians feel we need a better understanding of how to conserve our ocean resources.
When I started in the 70s, we fished mostly yellowtail, flounder on the tail of the Grand Banks. And then in the 80s we moved north at the codfish, and that disappeared after a while. And right now it's shrimp and crab.
After quite a few decades now, I've lived through different regime shifts in the ocean environmental conditions, and with them come a time of more productive or less productive. And you just see the behavior of the fish in those more productive and less productive times, and those swings are the biggest changes that you'll see as a fisherman. By the end of your career, you'll look back and recognize those as the biggest changes.
One important lesson we have learned is that all things in the ocean have value and play a role in the sustained health of the ocean. We must do our best to minimize the unnecessary destruction of any of our ocean's life forms, be they coastal plants like eel grass and kelp, or animals such as sea urchins and starfish.
It's probably the best example in the Pacific of an organism that declined and caused a major shift in the animals in an ecosystem is the decline of sea otters in the early 1900s. As sea otters disappeared, their prey, and in particular sea urchins, began to expand. And as the sea urchins expanded, they began to eat the kelp. And kelp forests and kelp communities started to disappear, ultimately leaving us with areas that had large abundances of sea urchins but nothing else. As we reintroduced sea otters, they began to eat the urchins, and we started to see recovery of the kelp and kelp communities. And as the otter populations are expanding, though, they're beginning to have impacts on other organisms. So we're beginning to see declines in some areas of crabs and clams and geoducks.
Deep sea or cold water corals and sponges are two of the groups of organisms scientists are only now learning about. These are different than corals found in the tropics that need sunlight to live. Thought by many to be a type of plant, corals and sponges are actually living animals. Cold water corals are stationary creatures that can live in isolation or in colonies. They can be found from the intertidal zone to the depths of the world's oceans. Many exist at depths up to 6 kilometers below the surface. Cold water corals may be found living on all ocean bottom types, from rock to sand-covered surfaces. They survive by eating small animals and feeding on material that drifts through the water. Sponges may be found in the same range of ocean depths as corals. Sponges are unique in that they have no internal organs. Most cold water corals and sponges are slow-growing and long-lived animals. Some of the corals that exist today started to grow hundreds of years ago. Many are fragile, and it can take decades or even centuries for a colony to recover from a disturbance of its habitat. In the past, there was very little research conducted on deep-sea corals and sponges. The environment they live in is so harsh and difficult to access that studying them was not viable. Most of the evidence of their existence came from specimens that were dragged from the bottom, tangled in deep-sea fishing gear.
We discovered corals and sponges years ago, quite by accident. We hauled them up in the trawls, but we didn't have any indication that it was any fish habitat, or we didn't know what it was. We saw them as a nuisance. There was no benefit to us, more detrimental to us than any benefit.
Research in Canada's offshore areas is not always an easy task. The ocean is vast and the weather can be unpredictable. The water is cold and deep. Until recently, these were some of the major impediments to conducting research on deep-sea corals and sponges. Advances in technology have enabled researchers to reach ocean recesses and observe corals and sponges in their natural habitat. Though the scientific knowledge about these creatures is still relatively recent, a number of things have been learned about these unique animals.
Some of the most recent discoveries we found regarding corals and sponges in the Newfoundland and Labrador region is how diverse they are and how widespread they are. We found them off Newfoundland right up to the Arctic Ocean. They range in size from a few millimeters to over 7 feet tall. These large corals are important on their own as individual colonies, but as well they're even more important when found in large concentrations. And individually they provide habitat, but as a group they provide unique ecosystems that are not found in other parts of the region.
The Pacific is an older ocean and we have an awful lot of animals here. The one thing that we have learned about corals and sponges is that we certainly don't know all of them. And people are finding new species all the time. These are new species to science. The last 10 years has been very exciting in terms of the whole world coming together and starting to take more interest in these kind of organisms and making sure that we actually do take care of them and their importance in the whole ecosystem and how that ecosystem functions because of them.
This new knowledge has enabled scientists and the fishing industry to understand the importance of protecting areas where corals and sponges exist.
It is very beneficial to fishermen to avoid the places of corals and sponges because it is the home of tomorrow's fish. That's where the young fish develop and grow. And besides, if you fish there and you get into corals and sponges, you get a lot of damage to the net, which is detrimental to fishermen, and no fisherman wants to do that. And the sponges also, because when you haul up some sponges, you get the odor that goes through the fish and it destroys the quality of the fish.
There's two important things that fish harvesters can do to help further deep sea coral and sponge research. The first is to share information on where these large concentrations are located. That way we can conduct in situ research, send down a remotely operated vehicle so we can investigate it further. The second thing that they can do is actually submit samples that they capture as bycatch. That way we can determine what species they're capturing, what kind of communities they are comprised of, and any other potential research that we can carry out on those particular specimens.
There's another important aspect which I've recognized in getting involved with science and from a fish harvester's point of view is that it's educating the harvesters on all of the components and the methodology and the process of developing good stock assessments for using that as an example, and helping fishermen, harvesters understand the interrelationships of all these things within the ecosystem that produce this result. That has been a learning curve that has really been welcomed in our community of fish harvesters, and we're becoming more sophisticated and more educated within that process.
It is not possible or practical to eliminate all human impact on coral and sponge habitat off our coasts. However, some researchers are working on changes to fishing gear that will assist fish harvesters in minimizing the negative effects fishing efforts have on corals and sponges.
Here at the Fisheries and Marine Institute of Memorial University, we've been working on a number of different innovations in bottom trawl design and operations. Today's bottom trawls are much more sophisticated than they used to be several decades ago. There's a need for increasing fuel efficiency, increasing bycatch reduction, as well as the need to reduce seabed impacts on the seabed. Lightening and lifting bottom trawls off the seabed is simply what we need to do in the future. Damaging the seabed is not acceptable to today's seafood consumers, and the seafood industry here in Atlantic Canada is responding.
The attitude of fishermen today has changed quite a bit from years ago. The fishermen are more conservative today. They look at the fishery in a different light, try to protect it more for the future than they did years ago.
As fishermen, we have significant human and financial investment in the resource, in a healthy resource. So it's important to understand that our investments and our culture is entirely dependent on a healthy resource. So we feel that we are at the front line of protecting the resource.
As time goes on and technology advances, we hope to know more about the ocean and the interactions of plants and creatures that inhabit it. Fisheries and Oceans Canada is currently working at domestic and international levels to identify vulnerable areas and is exploring new ways to further protect such areas. This includes restricting activities that have negative impacts on the ocean floor, including fishing in vulnerable areas. It is hoped this new knowledge, along with cooperation between stakeholders, will advance sustainable use and preservation of ocean resources for generations to come.